We are live. We are live for Daf Yomi. Good morning, everybody. Let's do this. All right, we've got Juliet as well signed on now. Welcome, Juliet. Good to see you. Or not see you. Can't actually see you. But anyway, we have got a screen share coming your way with today's Daf. We're going to be doing Daf page 65, Daf Samach Hey, in Masechet Shabbat, but we are first just going to have a little sneak look at the Mishnah from the previous day, because that will help us understand a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. So just to run it through very quickly, we're talking about the types of things on Shabbat that a woman is allowed to go out in the street with. Separately, we have Mishnah that talk about what men are allowed to go out in the street with. These ones are particular to women, and in the main we're concerned that if it's something that is particularly beautiful and an adorning feature, then there is a chance that she is going to take it off to show it off to her friends. And if she did that in a place certainly outside of Bushi, because we have an Eruv, so a lot of these problems don't exist for us at the moment. But if a person was to do this in a public place where there is no Eruv, and they were to end up carrying it for 6 feet or more, then there would be a problem. There could be a violation of a malacha, and so that's what that's broadly speaking what we're concerned about. So just to briefly go through yesterday's Mishnah, that she's allowed to go out with these strands, these decorative strands in her hair, whether they belonged to her hair, whether they belonged originally to another person's hair, whether they were made out of animal hair. You're also allowed to go out with these different types of pieces of jewelry, as long as they're sewn in to the rest of the head covering. The kavul of a pair nachris, and with this cap or with a wig into the courtyard. And then the bits that we're going to be focusing on today says like this: with a pad that is put into her ear. We'll see why. And with a pad that is put into her shoe, or some kind of sanitary pad. A pilpel of a gilgal melach. She's allowed to go out with a peppercorn or with some salt in her mouth. And anything. Let's scroll down a little bit. And anything that is put into a mouth for the purpose of healing or for the purpose of preventing bad odors. As long as she's not putting these things in her mouth for the first time on Shabbos. And if they fell out, you're not allowed to put them back. And then finally, the last clause in yesterday's Mishnah, Shein Toteves, a false tooth. Shein Shel Zahav, if it's made out of gold, Rabbi Matir, then Rabbi permits it. The Chachamim Osrim, and the Chachamim forbid it. So that's where that gives us a little bit of context to some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. So we're picking it up at the top of Samach Hey, the top of page 65a. We're second line down if you're looking inside a page, or we are first line up if you're looking on the screen in front of you. So here we go. We're analyzing now Ubamoch Sheva Ozna. Okay, because remember, we're picking apart all the different clauses in the Mishnah and trying to understand them better. Yesterday's page went through the beginning chunk of the Mishnah, and today it picks up with the clause Ubamoch Sheva Ozna. She's allowed to go out with a cloth, with some kind of pad inside her ear. Says Tani Rami Bar Yecheskel. Rami Bar Yecheskel teaches so as long as it's been tied into the ear. The purpose of this cloth was to be able to help ease the discomfort that could be caused by a buildup of earwax. So people used to have to wear these things. But Rami Bar Yecheskel says you're only allowed to wear it in your ear if it has been tied in, because if it's been tied in, then there's not going to be a concern that it will fall out while you're walking. And if there's no concern that it will fall out while you're walking, then there's no concern that you're going to end up picking it up and carrying it. So that explains the clause of the pad that goes into a person's ear. It says the Gemara of a mochsha b'sandala. What about this mochsha b'sandala? What was the purpose of this cloth that they would, or not what the purpose is, but what's the condition to be able to go out with this cloth? Tani Rami Bar Yechezkel b'hushikashu la b'sandala. That is as long, says Rami Bar Yechezkel, again, as long as it's been tied into your foot, because if it was to fall out, and the purpose would be to protect you from a wound that you could be having to walk around with. So as long as it's been tied down to your shoe, it doesn't. There's no risk of it slipping around, then you'd be able to go out with it. Says the Gemara, analyzing the clause in the Mishnah, when it comes to a pad or a cloth that a woman is having to wear because she is going through her cycle. Sava Rami Bar Chama lemeimar. So Rami Bar Chama would have thought to say, that it's only permitted if it has been tied in place and there's no chance of it slipping. However, Amar Rava says, Rava says it's permitted even if it hasn't been tied in place. Why? Because it's not a particularly pleasant thing to have to get all concerned about it if it was to slip out of place and end up falling out. So because a person is not going to be particularly fussed about carrying this around, or in a particular one desire to have to carry it around, so for that reason, even if it's not been tied in place, it would still be permitted to be able to go out with it. But now we see a question. Ba mine Rabbi Yirmiyah me Rabbi Abba. Rabbi Yirmiyah asked the question to Rabbi Abba. Asta la beis yad mahu. What would be the case if she had made some kind of handle, some kind of hand grip to keep it in place? So Amalei Mutter, the answer that they got back was that this would be allowed as well. It's Manami Amar Rav Nachman Bar Oshia Amar Rabbi Yochanan. It was also said by Rav Nachman Bar Oshia in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Asta la beis yad mutar. It would be permitted if there was some kind of hand grip, as it translates it over there, something in place that would keep it in place. Rabbi Yochanan, Nafik Bahula Bein Midrasha. So as Rabbi Yochanan did not go out with menstrual pads, but it is a story talking about how he would go out with the cloth in his ear. So Rabbi Yochanan Nafik Bahula Bein Midrasha. Rabbi Yochanan would wear one of these ear cloths, ear pads, to be able to help him with uncomfortable earwax build-ups. We touch on all areas in this Daf Yomi. There we go. This one's in some ways a little bit graphic. Anyway, Rabbi Yochanan nothing behula Beit Midrash. Rabbi Yochanan went out to the Beit Midrash with his ear pad in place, and his colleagues seemed to disagree with him that he shouldn't have been going out with this ear pad in place because it hadn't been tied in place. Rabbi Yanai nafik behula karmelis v'chalukin alav kol dora. Rabbi Yanai went out with one in his ear, and he only went out to a karmelis, which, if you remember, there were the different types of the domain. There was a public domain, there was a private domain, and you can't carry between the two. But there's also a karmelis, which was kind of like this middle type of domain. It wasn't quite a public domain, it wasn't quite a private domain, and rabbinically, you're still not to carry between one truda. So Rabbi Yanai went out with one in his ear, and he only went out to a karmelis, and everybody disagreed with him. Why? Because it hadn't been tied in place. V'hatani Rami Bar Yechezkel, and they were all asking, didn't Rami Bar Yechezkel teach v'hu shekashur la ba'oznah, that it had to be tied in place? So the Gemara answers, lo kashya, had mahadek, had lo mahadek. There's a secondary condition that can make it okay to wear, and that is if it's really tightly in place. Even if it's not being tied in, but if it's tightly stuck inside and it's not going to fall out, then you would not have to be concerned, which was why Rabbi Yanai and no, that was just me going trying to get my words out. Can you not hear me at all? Nah, no chance. Not on mute. You can't hear me? Can you not hear me? Any sound? Really? Well, that is tremendously inconvenient. I cannot figure out why there's no sound. No joy? Oh, okay. So I don't know what the last thing you heard from me was, but thank you, Richard, for flagging that in the chat. Oh, we can hear you now. Feel free to talk if if you can't hear me. So we were saying that there's a secondary condition. It either has to be tied in place, but even if it's not tied in place, then it has to at least be tightly fitted, so that there would be no concern of it falling out. So now the Gemara in the next few lines just polishes up the rest of the clauses in the Mishnah. The pilpel ubegalgal melach, that a woman would be allowed to go out with pepper, or like a peppercorn, or ubegilgal melach, or a grain of salt. And the Gemara tells us why a person would be so inclined to do this. Pilpel loreach haper. Pilpel, it was the I guess the early type of chewing gum. No, gone again. Gone again. Wow. I can't. No, I don't think there is. Let me see if I can free up bandwidth or something. You can't hear me still? Talk amongst yourselves. You can't hear me? Still no sound? Connection has gone again. Can you hear me yet? Okay. Well, we'll carry on recording to YouTube, and if at any point people are able to hear me, then hopefully you'll be able to hear me. I'm not sure why the sound on Zoom is not working. Oh, you can hear me now. Okay, brilliant. Well, I'll carry on, and if it does drop off, I'll keep it going, and then people can find it on the YouTube video. I don't understand why it's not coming through. I don't understand. I'm really sorry, everyone. But we don't let these things faze us. We don't let technology get us down. Let's try and push on, and we'll make sure that the recording's available. So the clause in the Mishnah, pilpel l'reach haper, peppercorns for preventing a bad odor in the mouth, an early type of chewing gum or mouthwash perhaps, and a gilgal melach, a grain of salt, l'dor sheni. They would put these grains of salt into their mouths in order to help relieve the pain of toothache. So that is why they would put these things in their mouths. Says the Mishnah, the Gemara quoting the Mishnah again. V'chol davar shenosenes l'toch piha. There was a clause in the Mishnah that a woman is allowed to go out with anything that would be typically put into a person's mouth, perhaps again to cover up any other bad smells that might come out. The Gemara interprets this as zangavila, which is ginger, or inami dartsuna, or alternatively you could say it is cinnamon. All these types of things, if they are there to get rid of bad smells, then she would be allowed to go out with these on Shabbos. Perhaps the implication here is men weren't as fussed about what their breath smelt like, because we don't necessarily see this reappearing again for men to be able to go out with. Maybe they were just more considerate to their fellow man, making sure that they didn't shrink. Says the Mishnah, Shein Toteves, Shein Shel Zahav. When it comes to false teeth, we said in the Mishnah, Rabbi Matir, that Rabbi permits going out with false teeth, and if they're made out of gold, for Chachamim Osrim, and Chachamim forbid going out with fake gold teeth. And the presumption over here for the Chachamim would be, again, that perhaps you're going to get tempted to remove it to be able to show it off, and you'll end up carrying it around. If it is an adornment, I guess people would be proud of it. Amar Rabbi Zera, says the Gemara, Rabbi Zera says, Lo shanu ela shel zahav. We're only concerned that the person might remove a gold tooth, aval b'shel kesef, but if it was a tooth made out of silver, divrei hakol mutar, then everyone would agree that you're allowed to take out, to go outside wearing a silver false tooth. Tanya Namihachi, the Brisa teaches as well, b'shel kesef, if it's made out of silver, divrei hakol mutar, then everyone would say that it's allowed. Shel zahav, but if it was made out of gold, then Rabbi Matir v'Chachamim rosim. As we've said, Rabbi permits it, and the Chachamim forbid it. Amar Abaye. Abaye said, there was Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, all three of these famous rabbis, Kulahu Svirulahu, they all hold the Kol Midei de Migniye Bei Lo Asya La'achuye, that anything that is going to, that a person would be embarrassed of, we do not need to be concerned that they are going to show it off out in public. So we see where these three rabbis say this. Rabbi Hada Amaran, Rabbi says it in the context of the false teeth. Rabbi Eliezer says it in the context of the following Baraisa. Rabbi Eliezer Pota B'Kareles Uvitzluchis Shel Pleiten, that a woman would be allowed to go out with this this pouch of spices, or this flask of perfume. So a woman would be allowed to go out wearing those around her neck, and that's because they were there to get rid of bad odors. And so we would have no concern that the person would remove them because of the embarrassment and way in which she would feel if these things became problematic for her to carry around. She would want to make sure that she could always wear it. So Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says that there's a Baraisa, the Tanya Klal Omar Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Kol shu lemata min asvacha yotze bo, lemala min asvacha eino yotze bo. So the evidence that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says that anything that a woman would be embarrassed with, we do not need to be concerned that she would carry it in public. That's because he has a rule that anything that a person wears very, very close to their head, they would never, you wouldn't need to worry about them removing it in public because they wouldn't want to feel the embarrassment of having everything out. But anything on top of that, the adornments and the different scarves or whatever it might be that she would wear on top of the kind of main hair cap, so then you would need to be concerned that she would take those things off in public. And that brings us to the next Mishnah on page 65a. Yotze b'sela shalatzinis. A woman is allowed to go out with a coin that has been placed on the foot of her sole, which again would be there to cover a wound or to help with a wound. The Gemara will look at it further. Habanot, young girls. Habanot ktanot, young girls. Yotzos b'chutin. They would be allowed to go out with threads that they would wear in their ears. The reason that they would wear these in their ears is that they would get their ears pierced at very young ages, but they wouldn't necessarily wear earrings until they were a bit older. So while they're still kind of wearing their training earrings, I guess, I don't know what you would call them. So these will just be a bit of a thread, or va'afilu bekismin Shabbat's name, or even if it was just like a little chip of wood that was there just to keep the hole open. So young girls would be allowed to go out with these, again, because you're not concerned they're going to take them out. Says the Mishnah, Aravios, women living in Arabia, Yotzos Reulos, they would be allowed to go out wearing a burqa, which was the fashionable trend of the time and the place. Umidios Perufos, and Median women, Jewish women living in Media, they would be allowed to go out wearing cloaks, which would be fastened with stones. So I can't really graphically depict it, but I guess you would have these cloaks that would cover up whatever needed to be covered up, and then you would have a stone which you would scrunch up, and then that would somehow fasten everything in place. So Median women would be allowed to go out with these cloaks. The Kol Adam, and the truth is that anyone would be allowed to go out with these. Any woman would be allowed to go out with these. But the rabbis were speaking in the way in which it was commonly found. You would be allowed to fasten cloaks with a stone or with a nut or with a coin, even though a coin you might be tempted to say should be muksa. As long as the first time that you were fastening your cloak with these items, as long as it wasn't done for the first time, that's Shabbos. So now the Gemara is going to analyze the different clauses of the Mishnah. The Gemara asks, first of all, my tzinis. At the very beginning, we said a woman is allowed to go out with a coin on the tzinis. What is the tzinis? And the Gemara answers, let's scroll down so that we can all see it. It is bas ar'a. It is the sole of your foot. So if a person had a wound on the sole of their foot, apparently wearing a coin would help. Umay shana sela. The Gemara asks that very question. Why is it a seller? Why is it this coin that is so important? Ilema kol midi da'akushi malila. If you want to say that the reason why it is so good is because it is hard, and so the protection afforded by this hard layer is what helps the person's foot, then le'avad la chaspa. Then why can't she just use something made out of clay? Why does it need to be this metal coin? Elam mishum shuchsa. Rather, it's because of the moisture that gets absorbed by the coin, or perhaps the coolness that's provided by the metal of the coin. Okay, so says the Gemara, le'avad latasa. So why can't she just use like a silver plate, like a silver disc? Why does it have to be a coin? Elam mishum sursa. So the Gemara says, no, actually, there's a third component to all of this as well, which is that there is a Elam mishum sursa is that there is an image engraved on the coin. So the bumpy surface of the coin apparently is of some relief as well. So there's three components. There's number one, that it's hard. There's number two, that it does the moisture. It absorbs the moisture. It cools the foot, whatever it might be. And the third is that it has an image on the coin, and the grooves and the bumps of the coin provide some relief. Le'avad la posla. Well, if that was the case, then why do you have to use a coin of that kind? Why can't you just get a piece of wood and put an image on that? Amar Abaye shma mina kulu malina. Abaye says the reason is that actually there's all three of these components, as we said. The fact that it's hard, the fact that it's cool and it absorbs the moisture, and the fact that it has this image on it. And that's why other things are not as effective. So there you go. If you were wondering how to give light relief to your foot, that's the Gemara's recommendation. Habanos yotzos b'chutin. Young girls are allowed to go out with threads in their ears. Avuha de Shmuel, the father of Shmuel, lo shavik lehu lebenase denafki b'chutin. The father of Shmuel would not allow his daughters to go out with these threads in their ears. It also tells us two other things that he wouldn't allow his daughters to do. He would not allow his daughters to sleep together in the same bed. And not only that, but he would prepare for his daughters in the period of Nisan. He would allocate an area that would serve as a mikveh for them. And he would also, in the days of Tishrei, he would make sure to put a mat down. So the way I understand this is that they would have been going to the mikveh for the reasons that women go to the mikveh. They would have been doing this in a river. And the Gemara is going to flesh this out a little bit more, but it would seem that he would kind of mark out an area which they would call a mikveh rather than a river in the days of Nisan. We'll see why. And in the days of Tishrei, as we'll see, that was to prevent muddy feet. He would lay a mat of some kind at the bottom of the river for when they would need to go to immerse. So now the Gemara is going to analyze these three things that the father of Shmuel would insist on for his children. So the Gemara says, first of all, Lo shavik lehu yotzos b'chutin. So first of all, we'd said he did not allow his daughters to go out with the strings in their ear, even though the Mishnah has said that they would have been allowed. So the Mishnah asks, the Gemara asks, but we've said in the Mishnah that young girls were allowed to go out with threads in their ears. So why was he different? The Gemara answers, the difference was that the father of Shmuel would give them very decorative and colourful threads to put in their ears, and because of that, he was afraid they would take these out on Shabbos, and so he didn't allow his girls to go out there. Lo shavik lehu ganin gabe hadde. This the second one that we said was that he would not allow his daughters to sleep in the bed next to each other. Now, part of the context for this is because it was common for people to sleep without clothes on. So when we're saying that the father of Shmuel would not allow his daughters to sleep in beds together, the implication here is that he would not allow them to sleep naked together, to sleep undressed next to each other. So we're going to see two reasons that get discussed over here. The first, as we're turning the page, we say Lema Masai Leila Rav Huna. Let's say that the reason is like Rav Huna would have said, that Amar Rav Huna Nashim Hamasoleles Zupazu Pasulas Lakuhuna. That maybe he was extremely concerned that the potential for arousal was something to be concerned about, and especially because Rav Huna would say that it would impact a girl's ability to be married off to a Kohen. And so he was concerned about that, and that is why he would not want his daughters to sleep like that. And the Gemara says, "Lo, this isn't necessarily the reason. There's another reason that gets offered up here, which is that he just did not want his daughters to get used to sleeping next to another body, as that could increase their temptation to do things and behave in ways that would be unbecoming of a Bas Yisrael, a daughter of Israel, speaking euphemistically, of course. And so he did not want to for his daughters to put themselves in a situation which would create further temptations down the line and lead them to do things that they shouldn't be doing. Says the Gemara, the second line of 65b, Va'avid lahu mikveh b'yomei Nisan, that he would make a mikveh for them in Nisan. So they would have been, as we said, they would have been immersing in a river. That specifically, they would have been immersing in the Euphrates River, because that's where they lived, down in Bava. And there is a rule when it comes to mikvaot, when it comes to immersing in rivers, which is that if you're immersing in a source of flowing water, like a river, then the rule is that the water that you are immersing in has to be comprised of natural water from the spring, from the origin of the river. If it was rainwater, then that would be a problem if it was flowing along. If the majority of the water was rainwater, you'd have to turn that into what we call a mikvah. You would have to have essentially a pool of fixed water, drawn water as we would call it. Okay, so if we think about how our mikvahot work, okay, our mikvahot are not flowing. They are a fixed pool of water, and that water is taken from drawn water, such as rainfall. And so the concern that he had was, in particular times of the year, when the rainfall was so significant, his concern was that the Euphrates River would be swelled and would be there would be more water in the river because of the amount of rainfall. So what he would do for those periods of time was to demarcate an area which would be the mikvah, and that way, even if it was rainwater, it would be allowed because they weren't immersing in a flowing stream of water. So let's see some of that inside. Va'avid lahu mikvah b'yomei Nisan, and he would make a mikvah for his daughters in the month of Nisan. So it would still be in the river, but it would be considered drawn water. Masai leila Rav, and this supports Rav's opinion. The Amar Rav says mitra b'ma'arava, when it would rain in the west, i.e. Eretz Yisrael, sahada rabba pras. This would be testimony to the fact that the Euphrates was now going to swell. Savar shalo yirbu hanotvin ala zofelim. And so he wanted to be careful that the amount of stagnant water, the amount of rainwater going through the water source was not greater than the amount of zochalim, which is moving water. So in order to do that, he carved out an area. Says the Gemara though, upliga de Shmuel, but this was not agreed upon universally, and Shmuel disagreed with this. The Amar Shmuel would say, Nahara Mekife Mivarech, that actually the river is blessed because of its banks, i.e., that the source of water was not because of the amount of rainfall, but it was a swelling on account of the origins, the springs of this water providing more water to the river. So you would not need to be concerned because there would be more flowing water coming through and not rainwater. And so he would have disagreed. He would have said, you don't need to make this mikvah. But as the Gemara tells us, but Shmuel seems to argue on himself with regards to another ruling. That the water of the Euphrates River only purifies during the days of Tishrei. And that's because the water coming through in Tishrei, since it's definitely not rainfall, because it's too early for rain to have impacted the river, that would be the only time that that you could be sure that the water was coming from its source and not coming from rainwater. And so that would have made it the only time that it would be good for immersing. So takes us all around the shop. But the fundamental points to understand was that Avuha de Shmuel, the father of Shmuel, had these three things that he would do for his children. One was that he wouldn't let them go out with the threads. One was that he wouldn't let them to sleep together if they were undressed. And the third one is that he would make a mikvah, carve out an area in the river for them in the months of in Nisan, where he would have been concerned about the amount of rainfall, and in the months of Tishrei, when he would be concerned that there would be mud on the floor, he would put mats out so that his daughters' feet wouldn't get muddy. And that was of a special concern as well, because if their feet got muddy, then it could have created a problem with their immersion. All right, says the Gemara, finishing up these last few lines of page 65. Porefes ala even, that you would be allowed to fasten your cloak with a stone. So the Gemara asks straight off the bat, for ha'amart reisha porefes. But at the beginning of our mission, they said that they are allowed to tie their cloaks. So what are we concerned about? So the Gemara answers, Amar Abaye, Sefer Asan Matbeya. That the end clause where we're concerned. Just 1 second, everyone. That's been really, really loud. So, Amar Abaye, Sefer Asan Matbeya, that the clause in the Mishnah where we were saying that perhaps they wouldn't be allowed to go out tied up like this, that was on concern of a matbeya, on the concern of a coin, because theoretically coin should not be allowed to tie up a cloak. But what we're saying is that as long as it was designated and it had been set aside for use on Shabbat, so says the Gemara, according to Abaye, that you would be allowed to use a coin to fasten up your cloak. Why Abaye? Abaye asks a question. Isha mahu shatarim v'tifraf ala egos lahotzi libna katan b'Shabbat. Abaye asks, what if a woman was to use a bit of shtick over here? What if she was to find a little bit of a loophole, and she would wrap her cloak using a nut, but really she wanted to be able to take the nut out to her young child so that the kid could eat it on Shabbos. So she wouldn't be allowed to carry it out, but maybe she could wrap it, use it as her button for her cloak, and then when she gets to her kid, she'll be able to give it to him or her so that the kid could eat. So this concept of ha'arama, of trickery, is quite an interesting one. It's quite funny because people often talk about, like, oh, don't these Jews just make up loopholes so that they can do what they want to do? We're not talking about anything forbidden necessarily. It's we can see even thousands of years ago, people were looking for legitimate and permitted ways to achieve the things that they wanted to do on Shabbos without violating any halacha. So if this was a violation of halacha, clear as day, then Abaye would have never asked it, and Abaye would have never suggested it. The reason why Abaye is in a position to ask the question is because the concept exists of us finding legitimate ways to do things that otherwise we might think are forbidden, right? And the area in which we see this most clearly, which is what the Gemara is going to mention in a second, is in the context of a person who, God forbid, is having to contend with a fire on Shabbos. So we have a problem in that because of the laws of Shabbos, you might not be able to get everything out of your house. Even if these things are on fire, even if the house is on fire. However, it talks about later in the Gemara, it's going to talk about ha'arama and the tricks to be able to get more things out. And one of those examples is to be able to pile on as many clothes as possible so that you can walk out of your house wearing all of these clothes, and that way you haven't carried them from one place to the other. So so again, over there you're using a I like that translation. One may employ artifice, right? You're allowed to work the system to be able to move things around in a permitted way. So that is the background to where Abaye's question is coming from. I know that I'm not allowed to carry a nut out to my kid, but maybe I can wrap it in my cloak and wear it legitimately, and then I can give it to him out on the street. So that's where we're at with Abaye's question, and the Gemara says, Tiboy leman da'ama ma'arimin tibai. So it's a valid question according to the one who says that you are allowed to utilize these tricks and these loopholes on Shabbos in the context of a fire, i.e. you can wear loads and loads of clothes to go out. So then it's a valid question. But leman da'ama ein ma'arimin tibai. But even according to one who says that you can't use this trickery in an instance of fire, it would also be a question. According to the one who says that you can do this trick in the instance of a fire, the the reason why we are looking for a way to get him out of this situation. Just 1 second again, please. I think the noise is going to be quite distracting. So over there, we have to be concerned that because this person's stuff is on fire, that if they're not allowed to take out so many clothes, then they're going to be like, well, I don't want to lose out, so I'm just going to put out the fire, and that's not allowed because you're not allowed to extinguish fire on Shabbos. If this woman's not allowed to take out a nut to her kid, she's not going to necessarily be like, oh, this is just ridiculous, I'm going to do it anyway. So maybe it's not going to be a dilemma. Or Dilma afilu leman da'ama ein ma'arim b'deleka. Even according to a person who says that you're not allowed to wear loads of clothes to get them all out in the instance of a fire on Shabbos, maybe hasam derech hotzah b'chach. Maybe over there, the only reason it was allowed is because it was a relatively prevalent way of moving clothes around, because apparently that's what clothing salesmen would do. They would pile on all of these clothes to help move them around in order to sell them. And because it was a usual way of wearing clothes, apparently, so that is why you'd be allowed to do it in the case of a fire as well, because you're not doing anything out of the ordinary. You're wearing it in a way that people would wear it, and that's why you're allowed to wear it like that, even in the case of a fire. Of al-hacha, in our case of a mum trying to get a nut out to her kid, ein derech hotzah b'chach, ein mashapir dami. Maybe because I got that right. Yeah. So over here, because it's not necessarily the normal way for people to move around with nuts, maybe we could say that. Let me just explain that one again. So, according to a person who says you can't pile on clothes to trick the system in the case of a fire, that's because it would be a common way of doing it, and so for that reason, they would forbid it in the case of a fire, but maybe they would permit it over here by the nut, because it's not the derech hotzah, because it's not the normal way of wearing nuts on clothes. However, as we see, the Gemara says, Teku, this matter is unresolved. And so the Gemara does not reach a conclusion. So as for the halacha l'maisa, the practical implication of all of this, one would need to double check, but I would imagine that, let me see if I can figure it out from here. Anything jumping out? But anyway, in any event, that concludes the daf for today. I'm going to stop the recording over here, and we're going to see if anybody on Zoom has heard any of that. Have a wonderful and meaningful day.